What up, everybody? This is yours truly, Drama Screen, covering movies, TV, and entertainment. Hello, hello, hello. I hope you have a good evening. Right now is tonight. Excuse me. I just had dinner. I apologize. Wednesday night, May 15th, 2019. Earlier today, I went to the Booksmart press screening. That's why I came home pretty late because it was pretty far. And the traffic was pretty heavy. Um, that's why I was not able to do this review of Catch-22 earlier on this afternoon. Um, but I've posted my review of Booksmart movie on this channel, so go check it out there. Okay. And right now, I'm here to give you my live review of this pretty cool new limited series on Hulu called Catch-22, which will air or which will premiere on Hulu Friday by midnight, I believe. And it's bingeable. You can binge watch the entire 6 episodes on Hulu starting May 17th. Um, um, Thanks to Hulu, I received an advanced screener of these entire 6 episodes. So I've watched the whole thing. And so I want to give you my thoughts about them. And this is not, this is not like a mystery suspense thrillers type of genre. So there's not much use, or there's no really reason for me to say, hey, spoiler alert, or no spoilers or whatsoever. Like it's okay. I'll describe to you what the show is in a minute. But again, just want to point out that there's not really much need for me to say, hey, whether it is a spoiler filled or spoiler free. Okay. Here's what's funny though. I was trying to watch that Hulu's other show called The Act. The Act. You probably have heard of it, starring Patricia Arquette and Joey King. I heard good stuff about it. It's been airing for the past few months or so, and people have been buzzing about how good the show is. So I was like, oh my God, I need to check out The Act. Um, and then I got email from Hulu. It's like, hey, come check out our new limited series coming up called Catch-22, premiering May 17th. If you could review them. And I was like, okay, I'm curious. And I must tell you, the first episode did not really excite me. After watching the first episode, I was like, really? I to be honest, I thought the first episode was kind of boring, but I stayed on. Episode 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it got better and better and funnier and sometimes more ironic than the last. And of course, one of the draws or the appeals of this series is that um, it's produced and starring. It's produced by and starring George Clooney, Oscar-winning actor George Clooney, and with his frequent collaborator and producing partner Grant Heslov. So George Clooney and Grant Heslov both won Oscars for producing Argo. Remember Argo, the one that Ben Affleck directed? So they produced this series, Catch-22, and George Clooney um, directed the first 2 episodes, and I believe they had other filmmakers for the next 2 episodes, and then Grant Heslov, Clooney's producing partner, directed the last 2 episodes, episodes 5 and 6. So let me open up my notes here on my screen so I can follow my train of thought and I won't lose track of the points or the bullet points that I want to make in this review. Um, okay, okay, good. All right. So, Catch-22, many of you Americans mostly would probably have already heard that term, Catch 22. It's a term, um, kind of like fish out of water, stuff like that. You don't hear other countries or even maybe British people also probably use fish out of water, but it's one of those terms that Americans are very familiar with. And um, I'm an immigrant, so I had to look things up. And I was like, what is this Catch 22? I've been here 20 years. And sometimes I come across Catch 22. I had to look it up again to remind myself what the meaning is. And and it's actually the series. It's actually based on this novel by Joseph Heller. I believe it's 1962 that it was published, and then it got turned into a movie adaptation in 1970. Let me double check here. 1970. I want to say 1972, 73. And the director of that one is the late great Mike Nichols. Mike Nichols is the same guy who gave us the Graduate. And Catch 22, 1970. There you go. The movie starred Alan Arkin in the lead character of Yossarian. Yossarian. There you go. Yossarian. Now, the story is set in World War II, and the place is the island of Pianosa in the Mediterranean Sea, west of Italy. So Italy, basically. And during World War II, and Yossarian, Captain John Yossarian, is a U.S. Army Air Force's B-25 bombardier. So his job, he would be on the bomber plane, and his job is he's the guy who would drop the bombs, and he would listen through the intercom to his colleagues directing him, um, coordinates on where to drop and where and exactly what angle and exactly at what minute to drop the bomb, so because so that when the bombs actually hit the ground, it'll hit the target. So that's his job. He releases the bombs. um that's his job as Captain John Asarian. Now, Alan Arkin played the character in the 1970 movie, and in this series, that character is played by actor named Christopher Abbott. Now, if you are not familiar with Christopher Abbott, don't worry, he's not that famous yet, but you may have seen him or his work in such movies as It Comes at Night, and he played a reporter in Vox Lux last year. He also showed up in Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. So he hasn't been around in the business for too long, or he hasn't been here in the industry long enough for you to like, oh, I recognize his face. But Catch 22, and I think he was also in Girls, right? Girls series HBO, if I'm not mistaken. But Catch 22 is his like big leading role, especially something that's produced by a big name like George Clooney. So yeah, Christopher Abbott, that's his name. Okay. Um Now, just want to let you know that I have never read Joseph Heller's book. It has been deemed by many as one of the most influential novels of the 20th century. I haven't had the opportunity or the privilege to read it, and I have not watched the 1970 movie starring Alan Arkin, the Catch 22 movie. So I'm coming at this fresh. All right. I have no idea or no clue if the events or the situations or the storylines that happen in this series, I don't know if they are from the book or from the movie, or that the series only takes parts of the book and the old movie, but it runs with its own thing for the subsequent episodes. I don't know. I have no clue. So again, I'm coming at this fresh. But let's get back to the meaning of Catch-22. It's a tricky one. So in the case of, well, here's a good example. Using this series. So in this case, John Yossarian, played by Christopher Abbott, he is, for lack of a better word or for lack of a better description, he's a coward. He's a coward. He doesn't want to die. He doesn't want to stay too long in the service. Um, and every death of his fellow servicemen makes him even more and more afraid and makes him want to leave the service or the military even more. So that's him. That's his trait. um, and so in the movie and also in the first episode, it's implied here that John Isarian wants to exit the military by way of or by claiming insanity. Um, that said, the military says, "Hey, if you are well enough to make the claim or to want to exit or sign off on account of insanity, if you're sound enough to do that, that means you're sane, which means you are not allowed to leave or to desert your duty." So, Catch-22, that's one example that basically you lose either way, or like whatever effort you are trying to exert, it comes off or it results to your disadvantage. Um, in a way, I guess Catch-22 can be described as damned if you do, damned if you don't. But it's a situation where the outcomes, both outcomes, are not to your benefit, basically. And no matter which way you try to wiggle out of it, there's this thing coming back at you the other way around, saying, "Hey, because you're trying to wiggle around it, you can't wiggle out of it." That's basically Catch-22. Do you get what I'm getting at here? So it's a very, very, I guess, funny phenomenon, if you will. In the nature of this show, if you're asking me, "Hey Rama, is this a heavy drama? Is this what is this? What's Catch-22 series?" It's a screwball comedy. It's screwball comedy, but with a bit of drama, but the drama is mostly focused on the consequence of war. So think of Band of Brothers or think of the Pacific, but with a bit more emphasis on the comedy, specifically the screwball comedy. Um, Screwball, silly, kind of outrageous, a little bit over the top sometimes. That's what I mean by screwball. And George Clooney is no stranger to screwball comedies. He has directed some screwball comedies in the past. You may remember some of his movies. Leatherheads, remember Leatherheads? The football comedy starring John Krasinski. Excuse me. And then the Monuments. Let me double check here. The Monuments Men. The Monuments Men. That was also screwball comedy. Hey, Tyler's here. George Clooney doing a series on Hulu seems like an odd direction for his career. That's true. That's true. But George Clooney does not show up in all the episodes in the series. He directed only the first two episodes, and his producing partner Grant Heslov directed the last two episodes. So basically, George and Grant Heslov, the Oscar-winning producers of Argo, the Ben Affleck movie, They pretty much just the guys, trying to make this happen. Um, I forget exactly who are the masterminds or the showrunners or the actual creators of the show. But George Clooney and Grant Heslov are the directors and executive producers of Catch-22. The actual stars are Christopher Abbott and a bunch of other young fellow men. So again, this is like Band of Brothers, but with screwball comedies. So these guys are the actual stars of these 6 episodes of limited series. By the way, this is limited series. This is miniseries. So it's not season one. There's no season two. I'd be surprised if there was. Um, and it's obvious because the story actually ends. Believe me, in episode six. I'm sorry, in episode six, it ends. There's no cliffhanger whatsoever. So it's a limited series. Okay, so just like Leatherheads, just like The Monuments Man, it's screwball comedy, but there is a hint of drama at the end of each episode to remind you guys of the consequence of war, and that consequence is lethal. The deaths of your brothers in arms. Um, and so that happens in each episode, and it happens in a very somber way, not in a comedic way whatsoever. Now, another thing I note here is that the show has a yellow color palette, which bugs me. I hate shows that have yellow. Okay, remember Breaking Bad? I freaking love Breaking Bad, right? And they have this meme on the internet a few years back, um, differentiating how Breaking Bad looks in New Mexico in Albuquerque versus whenever Heisenberg or Walter White or Jesse Pinkman, sometimes they would go to Mexico. Remember that there's a storyline in Mexico with the cartel. So in Mexico, it's like all yellow. So New Mexico and Mexico, it's like side by side. And so that's just like the movie Traffic with Benicio del Toro. You have the American side with Michael Douglas. It's all blue and with colors, and then you go to down Mexico with Benicio del Toro's character, and it's all yellow color palette. And so anyway, back to Catch-22. That's basically it. It's all yellow from start to finish, the entire thing, and I don't like that at all. I just there's something about the color that just like brings me down, man. No offense if you like that palette. And okay, so another thing also that I want to note before I go further into the themes of Catch-22 is one criticism that I have about the show is that even though even though it has nurses, because the story is set in a military base, kind of like MASH. It has a lot, it has nurse characters. One of them was played by George Clooney's cousin. I believe her name is, let me get that for you, Tessa Ferrer. And the show at first kind of hints like, oh, maybe we're gonna get to know Tessa Ferrer's character, Nurse Duckett. I was like, okay, maybe the show's gonna introduce us to Nurse Duckett even more, like instead of just her bandaging somebody or giving somebody pillow in the ward room. Maybe we're gonna get to know her more or explore her story more. And there is one episode that makes it seem like we might be heading towards that direction. Unfortunately, it did not go there at all. Like it only started that way, but then it became back to be about Yossarian again, Christopher Abbott's character again. So my point is that this show doesn't have strong female characters. Unfortunately, it lacks um, balance on that front. It's very very testosterone driven. So just a heads up on that. Okay, so I mentioned to you Catch 22, right? Damned if you do, damned if you don't. This guy Yossarian wants to leave the military on account of insanity, but the military says, "Hey, if you're sound enough to make that plea to exit the military on account of insanity, that means you are sane, and therefore you are not allowed to leave." So he loses either way. And what's funny about, because remember I told you that episode 1 is kind of slow and boring, but episode 2, 3, 4 it picks up. And not that it picks up in a way that it's more action packed or whatever. It picks up in a way that uh the show or the episodes, those subsequent episodes, have their own examples of Catch-22. And sometimes it happens, the Catch-22 phenomenon sometimes happens to even Yossarian's colleagues on the base, not just on him all the time. Like, for example, there's this character named Major Major. I kid you not. And he's played by Bill Pullman's son, Lewis Pullman. You may have seen him last year in the movie Bad Times at the El Royale, playing the bus boy. So Major Major, his character's name, Major Major, is funny. Um, he gets promoted to becoming a major. so so he's Major 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 now, his name. And there's one scene where when he's arguing with his second in command, because Major Major doesn't want to receive any guests that day or ever. So he has argument, not necessarily argument, I guess back and forth. He has back and forth debate with his second in command. His second in command is like, "What about this guest that has an appointment?" And Major will be like, "Oh, tell him this. Oh, what if I tell him that? Then they're gonna react this way." Then and then Major says like, "Oh, then you tell him this way. But if I do this, then that, what about the other one?" It's like, and they go back and forth for the next, I want to say, for a good 5 to 6 minutes. It's hilarious. Um, and that's Catch-22, and that's Catch-22 happening to Major Major. Is like, dude, I can't get out of this situation. I don't want to be a major, but now that I've been given this responsibility, or it's thrown on my lap, I'm trying to get out of, or wiggle my way out of my responsibility of meeting guests. But my second in command keeps like coming up with the scenarios like, "Oh, if you don't want to meet them, what about that other one? But if you don't want to meet that other one, that means you're gonna have to meet this one." Oh my god. And so that's one example. There's another example also that happens to another colleague. And some, of course, Yossarian is the lead character, so he gets to experience Catch-22 often, because in each episode, um, each episode shows Yossarian trying to concoct or come up with ways to exit the military. Like at one point, he enters the tent for the strategy room or the war room, and he moves the bomb line from the map. And so in the morning, people think like, "Oh my god, so that area has been captured by the infantry, by the ground soldiers. That means we don't have to fly and drop bombs in there anymore." And so and Yossarian's like, "Yes, I don't have to go up in the air again." Oh, because Yossarian's a coward. It's like, "Oh, I can be safe here, down here on Earth." But then something happens, and the captain gets angry. I was like, "Oh, I'm sending you guys back up." And so it's like, "Oh, there's nothing that I can do, Yossarian, like that can get me grounded, so I don't have to fly up there anymore." So that's one example. And there's another attempt. He does another effort in the other episode. It's just funny how um how persistent he is. And it's funny how the universe keeps like slamming the door on him. Like, nah, nah, you can't get away or get out of this service that easily. Um, so while I was watching the entire 6 episodes, I was wondering, like, okay, is Yossarian's cowardice justified? Right? Um, well, here's the thing. Here's what's interesting. Before I get to that, the neat and greedy of that. Um, I don't know if this was from the novel that this series was based on, but there's a couple of points that this show brings up that I find to be progressive. And the novel by Joseph Heller, as I understand it, I've never read it, is an anti-war novel, and it was published in 1962, I believe. So way after World War II. Um, and of course, it's like the dawn of Vietnam War, the 60s. So I'm wondering as I'm watching it, the 6 episodes, I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, World War II, that was supposed to be the last war that was justified, right? Because we have this tyranny, right? The Japanese Empire and the Hitler's Nazi, they were enslaving the world. So we, as the good guys, have to stand up to them and liberate the people, um, the oppressed. That was the last war that was justified. The greatest generation, they said, right? Uh, the wars that happened after that, Korean, Vietnam War, Iraq, Afghanistan, those wars have been, for lack of a better word, morally wrong or morally questionable. Some of them are illegal, some of them are profit driven. So there's a scene in this show because one of the characters named Milo is an entrepreneur, and Milo always thinks of ways to sell things to make profit. He's a soldier, but he's also more of a, like, he's a visionary, like, oh, you and I should go into business together, we can sell this, we can make tons of money. He's that kind of guy, that kind of guy, right? You must have friends like that. So Milo one time has this conversation with the captain. The captain is played by Kyle Chandler, the guy from Friday Night Lights. And Milo's like, "Oh man, these tomatoes that I got from Italy, dude, we should sell this." And then imagine, and then if we open up another hangar, and then we use one of the planes to transport or to export and import some products. Imagine the profit we can make, Captain. And the captain at one point says, uh, "This is war, and war is not about profit." And when he said that, I know it's not meant to be like humor or joke, but it's sort of like a satire premonition, if you will. I know I'm describing it wrong here, but what I'm trying to say is, like, it's as if the show's telling you, hey, back then in World War II, they really mean, the guys, our fighters, our heroes, they're really there to for a just war, to defeat Hitler, to defeat tyranny. Um, but what war has evolved into from then on is about profit, unfortunately. So it's one of those cases. So the show has that moment, and there's another moment too when there's a couple of progressive points that the show brings up where I'm like wondering, like, okay, is that from the book, or is that the writers of this show injecting their ideology into the story? So that's something to think about. Um, I forgot to mention Kyle Chandler. Kyle Chandler in this show, his role as the colonel, he is a very stereotypical army leader, just like Vince Vaughn in Hacksaw Ridge. Just like that guy in the Full Metal Jacket. Remember when he says to Vincent D'Onofrio's character, like, "I will unscrew your head and shit down your neck." So Kyle Chandler is a stereotypical colonel, just like that, where he would like demean or belittle, um, would yell at the soldiers with all kinds of graphic descriptive stuff, but deep down his heart is in the right place, kind of like Vince Vaughn in Hacksaw Ridge. So that's what I mean by stereotypical. Like anytime you see a story about army training boot camp or military base, you usually would expect or anticipate for a character like Kyle Chandler's character or Vince Vaughn's character to be part of that story. So that's what I mean by stereotypical. um, so okay, is Yossarian cowardice is his cowardice justified? So if World War II is supposed to be the just war, right? A war that was justified. Um, so you could probably argue like, well, so his cowardice is misplaced. Like, if if Yossarian believes that this war is not warranted, or that this war is only for profit to get oil, or that this war is not about liberating people, if he believes such things, then we can probably give him the benefit of the doubt. But it's a justified war. Therefore his being scared of being there, we would probably like chastise him, like, what are you doing, what are you doing? Dude, you get to be part of the next you get to be part of the greatest generation, and you want out? What the heck? um and another thing why I was kind of like not on the side of Yossarian is the fact that, I kid you not, the bombardiers, him and his fellow colleagues, they fly out on planes, bomber planes, they drop bombs, and then they come back to the base, and then guess what? What they do in between their mission? I kid you not. They go to the beach and hang out at the beach, swimming, and sometimes they would go downtown, downtown Italy, whatever the closest town is, Rome or whatnot, and they would have sex with the prostitutes. So going to the beach, there's so many scenes, episodes of him just like cliff diving and just swimming, and then there'll be episodes when him and his friends are with prostitutes. So my point is like, dude, you're not the infantry or the ground soldiers or the ground support. Those guys are like, man, those guys have it rough. They have to be in the jungle. Sometimes they can get snowy. Sometimes there's mosquitoes, and then look, you get to swim and you get to sleep with like. So my point is that, like, why, Yossarian, are you being scared shitless like a chicken? Like, you have it so good. You have it so good, man. That said, the deaths, as I said earlier, in each episode there is a soldier's death, the death of a brother in arms, that makes Yossarian's fear deepens more and more. Um, so the show wants to tell you, yeah, these guys do have it good, that they get to swim, that they get to sleep with prostitutes, but their mission when they are on air, those missions are dangerous. So it doesn't take away the fact that they don't, the fact that they're not infantry ground soldiers. It doesn't take away from the fact that their missions are also equally dangerous. I mean, like, and I gotta tell you, man, the way this series gives you that aerial flight view, and you see the bombs drop from the sky, And of course, when the planes fly through the territory, the enemy's territory, the enemies would shoot up to the sky their own counterattacks. And I gotta tell you, it's kind of scary watching it. Um, and the planes back then in World War II, they're not as advanced or as secure uh, or as comfortable as the planes right now or the military planes right now. Back then, it was like rickety, rickety metal, and you're just holding, or you're praying to dear God that the plane would shake less, instead of because the turbulence are just so massive, so shaky all the time, and it really messes with you. If you already are a coward, it messes with you even more. Um, so the show wants to tell you, even though it's a screwball comedy, the show wants to tell you, hey, the sacrifices of these men are no joke. Yes, these other situations with the CATCH-22 phenomenon, they are entertaining. It is amusing to watch. Yossarian never gets his way out of the military. That's fun and all, but there are consequences in war, and those consequences are mostly lethal. Um, Bombers do die. Tail gunners can die. The guy that's on the window with the shotgun, he can die. There could be a freak accident happening during the mission, and um, they have about, well, for Yossarian, I think he had about 50, 51 missions. At one point, he wanted to finish all of them, uh, but that did not even work either. So the show ends, or the series ends in episode 6 with Yossarian pretty much giving up or not giving a single crap anymore. It's like, obviously, whatever I do, it's not gonna work out. I guess the universe wants me here, so screw it. um, so if you ask me if there's a moral lesson or a message or a theme that this series wants to give us, the audience, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out. I think it's open to interpretation. It is it is a study of a person's cowardice, that's for sure, an observation of his cowardice, the consequence of some choices, definitely that's one of them. um, but it's not like the show's like, and folks, because of this, therefore, we must act this way in our lives. No, no, the impression I got, the show doesn't preach in any way possible. So, um, take it as you want. Definitely, it's an entertaining series, limited series. Um, you'll be surprised at some of the turn of events or the consequence of Yossarian's action. The ones that I described you earlier, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Trust me, I don't want to spoil too much here, but there'll be more. He'll be doing one thing to try to, of course, exit the service, but that one thing um, causes a chain of events or causes a reaction that results in the other thing that goes against him, but sometimes it affects also his colleagues. So it's funny, it's amusing, it's entertaining, but in a way it's also somber because, again, of the consequence of war, and the band of brothers, the brotherhood that they form here, in this military base. So that is the drama aspect uh, within this screwball comedy that is CATCH-22. So that's it. That's my long rant. Those are all the notes that I have. That's my review. The entire Hulu's CATCH-22 limited series, produced by George Clooney and Grant Heslov. starring Christopher Abbott, co-starring Hugh Laurie and Lewis Pullman. And this series will premiere this Friday, May 17th on Hulu. There are only 6 episodes, and you will be able to binge watch the entire 6 episodes. Each episode is only 40 minutes long, so it'll get by just like that. But I highly recommend it. Don't miss out on Catch-22. Thanks so much for tuning in, you guys. You have a good night and subscribe to my channel. And as always, press that like button and ring that bell. Let's rock this.